Hello, everybody. Steve here from The Varied Life. You can check that out on YouTube. Like, subscribe, all of that good stuff. Would really appreciate that. So, today we're talking about being retired in Korea, and that's what me and my wife have done. We sold everything: the house, the cars, the truck, the guns, the ammo, everything in the kitchen junk drawer, and we ended up retiring in Korea. With that said, there are some things that happen when you live in overseas countries. And since we're here in Korea, we're reporting on the doctor strike. So basically, what is happening is the Korean Medical Association, the KMA, is basically a doctors' union. And what they have ended up doing is rejecting the government's order to have more medical school students that would end up with more doctors for the aging population here in Korea. Now, the reason that they say this is a necessity is it goes all the way back to 2000. The government has been wanting to increase the number of doctors to meet the high demand, and we're at a tipping point where, they've kicked the can down the road so much that this absolutely has to happen. But the problem is the KMA has rejected any increase of doctors. And this is really interesting. We'll get into some speculation on what's going on. But basically, in Korea, there's a law that says that doctors can be ordered to go back to work if it's a public health crisis. And because of the strike, resident doctors have walked out, about 10,000 of them. And it's people can't get cancer treatments, people can't get surgery. There's already reports of people dying because the doctors have left their posts and don't care for their patients. And it's very strange. You would think, okay, well, what type of thing is going on? Why doesn't the Korean Doctors Association, the KMA Medical Association, why don't they want more doctors? They've rejected more doctors ever since 2000. They rejected telemedicine. They rejected a bunch of things, and it's like, it would be too competitive. Seriously, too competitive? Doctors being competitive if you had more doctors. Another excuses that I saw with the KMA on Korean news is that they end up saying, well, it's too competitive, and the hospitals couldn't handle all those new doctors. And it's like you do the math and you're like, okay, well, there's 100 teaching hospitals at which these resident doctors serve at and do their residency. And 2,000 divided by 100, that's 20 doctors per hospital. And there's how many departments in a hospital? So you're telling me that a department in a hospital can accept one or two more doctors? Really? That's what you're saying? I find that really hard to believe. And then one of the most idiotic things that I've heard in a while, and that's saying something, seeing that we have TikTok and Instagram and all the, social media, is that the Korean Medical Association also said that another reason they don't want more doctors is because of it would lower their pay. And it's like, so this goes into, well, how does it lower the pay? Well, because 90% of the hospitals are for-profit hospitals, or private hospitals. So now you're starting to see little puppet masters here they don't want more doctors because that would mean an increase in pay and it would reduce their bottom line. So in other words, they would be paying more expenses and they wouldn't be getting as much money as they are now. So that's why the KMA, in my opinion, says, we don't want more doctors because it's going to reduce the pay of the current doctors because you hire more doctors, even though they're severely overworked. When you see 100 patients a day, when you're working 120 hours a week, when you get, work 6 days, 1 day off, when you can only see a patient for 3, maybe 4 minutes at a time, it's overworked. And with the aging population, about 20% of the population is really aging. The doctor to patient ratio is the lowest of all developed nations. I think Mexico and Turkey are the only two below Korea when it comes to doctor patient ratio. But the most absurd thing is it will lower the prestige of the current doctors. Yeah, they actually said this. So, in other words, being a doctor in Korea is one of the highest paid professions in Korea. And they're saying that there's a certain level of prestige for a certain amount of doctors. And if you bring more doctors into it, it's kind of like it brings out, it distributes the prestige amongst more doctors. So it lowers their prestige. And they don't like that. I swear to God, they actually said this. So, yeah, it is really, really interesting, and we're going to talk about some of these things. So let's take a look. Come on. Bam, there we go. All right. First of all, we'll take a look that they're going to suspend license of striking doctors as they refuse to end their walkouts. So what the government did is gave an order because different country, different laws, and they gave the order and said, hey, you resident doctors, we're going to work with you. We're going to spend 7.5 or $4 billion to improve, the medical system and so on and so forth to make things better, which the doctors union in the past has always rejected, along with more doctors. What's interesting is that the union has said, well, we're going to go on strike. And so, 9,000 doctors went on strike. The government gave a deadline of 29 February, and that came and went. And then they said, well, if you don't come back to work, we're going to suspend your licenses for 3 months. Excuse me. Suspend your license for 3.5 months. And it's interesting because that's one of the lowest penalties that there are. And that penalty for a resident doctor means that they have to redo that year of residency. And same in the United States. If you have, a long amount of time that you're not there doing your residency, you can't just go back and start over and do those 3 months again. They're on a schedule, and so you have to wait and redo that entire year. So that's going to be more of a burden for resident doctors because that means that they only get paid $3,000 a month, which if they haven't been paid much, then yeah, they probably need to get a pay raise. I don't know when they got their last pay raise. I cannot for the life of me find any information on that. So we'll just assume that they need more pay, which they should. Now, once you become a regular doctor, you get paid about $200,000 a year. So the doctor says, the government says, you guys got to come back. If you don't, here's what's going to happen. We're going to suspend licenses. And the hardball of the administration that they have now, the guy who's in charge, Yoon, was a chief prosecutor for Korea. So he's really pro, he's like F around and find out. And these doctors are finding out the hard way, and it's going to put them at a burden. But the thing is that the Korean Doctors Association or the Medical Association has been putting these holding the Korean people hostage by not wanting any doctors. Matter of fact, in history, they've actually wanted to reduce the number of doctors. But they're being overworked. They want better working conditions, but they don't want more doctors. And I think this has to do with a little bit of corruption between the private hospital investors and who owns the hospitals and the big chaebols. And so kind of like think of mafia. There's like 10 or 20 different big Korean families that run pretty much all the businesses, with Samsung being the highest of the chaebols. And I think it has to do with corruption about money, because if you hire more doctors, that means more expenses. That means less money for the chaebols. Just kind of saying, just throwing that out there. So anyway, now they're talking about suspending the licenses of these doctors and to suspend their licenses for at least 3 months. And that's from the Vice Health Minister, Park Min-soo. He told at a briefing. And despite the appeals of the government and pretty much the majority of the Koreans as a whole, I've seen surveys of 80% side with the government, saying that they need more doctors to give more appointments to the aging population. They need more doctors. It's just a stated fact. So they strongly urge the doctors to return to their work, but they don't. Anyone who refuses such order can be punished with a suspension of their license for up to 1 year and 3 years in prison, or a $30 million fine, which is about $23,000. So, yeah, it's interesting because, the Doctors Association doesn't want more doctors. Now, mainly this is only affecting the 100 teaching hospitals. The hospital that I go to, matter of fact, I just went there yesterday for a bunch of tests, was not affected. They did see a little bit of an increase of people because people can't go to the other hospitals and get seen, so they go to outlying hospitals, and that's where they're being seen. So, but other than doctors striking, we don't see that at the hospital we go to. But at these teaching hospitals, the striking doctors are a small fraction of the 140,000 doctors that are here. And you think, 9,000, that's not that bad. But they account for 30 to 40% of the total doctors that are in these teaching hospitals and major hospitals. So they assist senior doctors in training. And if you know anything about that, residents do the majority of the work while they're being supervised to make sure that they don't make mistakes. They finish their residency and then they become the fully certified specialist or speciality that they're in. But now they're risking persecution because now the deadline is over. And the doctors, about 500, returned back to work, 300 to 500, depending on the reports that you read here in Korea. So, they missed the deadline and it doesn't look good. The government has said that it needs to, add more doctors. And the problem is the Korean Medical Association, again, they just don't want more doctors. And in my opinion, what happens is it really has to do with corruption and money because the hospitals are mainly for profit. And so if you add more doctors, that's taken away from the bottom line of these companies. And even though it is woefully needed. So we got that going on. And here in Korea, I think what's going to be interesting is they're going to suspend licenses. So that's going to be a problem for the doctors doing their residency now because now they're going to have to do that year over again. I think the Korean government's going to get their way. But the other interesting thing is the doctors union has such grips and such outreach of they're the puppet masters that it's even gone into medical school to where 46% of the medical school students had, put in letters said, I'm not going to school, because we're supporting and we're in solidarity with our fellow, doctors, and even though they're not doctors yet. And I find that very problematic because, for one, the Korean Medical Association will not have these medical students back if for some reason they get kicked out of medical school. They won't pay their bills, they won't pay their tuition, they won't pay their student loans. So from my perspective, it seems like they're just being puppet masters and the medical school students are being puppets. And the KMA does not have their best interest at heart. That's just what I see from the news. I could be wrong. Obviously, this is a very complicated situation, and I'm only seeing from an outsider's perspective. But there's nothing really you can do to alleviate such overworking when you're working 36-hour shifts, when you're working 120 hours a week, seeing hundreds of patients a day. The only thing that's going to alleviate that is a lot more doctors. And the fact that you have the least amount of doctor-patient ratio just, emphasizes that fact. But these college students who are going through medical school have quit medical school, and now it's getting problematic because it's like, we're going to go on strike, yay, and we're not going to go back to school. And they seem to have forgotten that here in Korea, you got mandatory military service of 18 months. So if you're not in medical school, it's time to join the army now. So that could be, is that something you really want to do? Now, what's interesting is with doctors or medical school students is they will go through medical school and then they'll do residency training and then their military service is done in a military hospital. So it's not like they're going in the Army and they're going to play infantry and, be a cook or a mechanic or anything like that. They're going to be doctors. They're going to be in military hospitals. And so they will continue on their training and they'll get some military experience along the way, as is every male that is in Korea has mandatory military service. Apparently, a bunch of medical school students don't like that idea, so a number of them, about 3 or 5% of them, have come back to medical school and they're going back to school. So basically, they had a 7 to 10 day vacation and now they're back hitting the books. Yeah, it is a tangled web we weave when we deceive, and I forget the whole thing from JFK. But yeah, this is going to come to a head, and when you start issuing, and I think what they're going to do, it's a bluffing game. So now the doctors' unions say, "Oh, we're going to strike, and you need to reject." That's the line in the sand of which they will not cross. It's like we will not negotiate on having more doctors, which is a weird thing. You'd think it would be, we need more pay. We need more of this, more of that, but they're hell bent on, the only thing we're not going to do is take more doctors. Again, that just screams of follow the money and you will find out why they're saying we don't want more doctors, because it requires money. And that means if you give doctors money, that means somebody else gets less money. And that's kind of easy to deduce. But it's interesting how we don't see any of this in the Korean news or in the foreign news sources of this aspect, any speculation anyway. It's always good to speculate and things like that, but I think that's really what's going on. So, now, then they throw the ball into the government's court. The government says, well, you need to come back to work. We're going to suspend you. They throw the ball back into the doctors' union. They say, boom, they get the ball, and they're saying, well, we're solidarity. We're hanging with each, that's what we're doing. And so they continue to go on strike, and they throw the ball back to the government. Well, now the government has the ball, and they're saying, yeah, suspensions are starting. Do I think that they're going to suspend 9,000 licenses of these resident doctors, with a stroke of a pen, all in one moment, kind of like, the snap in Thanos? I don't think so. I think what they're going to do is they're going to do it in waves, and they'll do a small amount of suspensions to show, hey, yeah, this is what we're going to do, and we're doing it. And so it's going to be it's kind of reminds me of tensions on the DMZ. We're going to do this, and South Korea's going to do this, North Korea's going to do it, South and North, and, shouting jabs at each other and this. Well, if you don't, it almost, then it reminds me of more likely of two kids fighting in a schoolyard. But the problem is that the people that are being held hostage and the people that are in danger are the Korean people and foreigners like myself that reside here in Korea. Again, reports of people who haven't had medical treatments for cancer, people have strokes, gone to multiple hospitals or cardiac arrest, and because there's no doctors, they've been turned away and people have died. That's liability. Where's this all going to go? So I don't think that the government is going to suspend licenses in mass. I think they'll have a small portion and say, hey, these, boom, here's 500 or 1,000. There'll be a small sampling of, hey, we're going to suspend licenses. Because on the other side, if you suspend all of them, the government's going to be in a bad position, and so are the Korean people. So I don't think that they're going to suspend all 9,000 licenses for 3.5 months from the get-go, because that would put the Korean people more at risk. But I think what they'll do is they'll do a tiered suspension system. Well, they'll do like maybe 250, 500, maybe 1,000 at the very most. I don't think they do 1,000. I think, maybe a few hundred suspensions to show that, hey, we were really serious about what we're talking about. And yeah, it's in the start. I think what they'll end up doing is they're going to get the strike leaders and they're going to penalize them by removing their licenses. I think that would be a more prudent way is to strike at the strike leaders who are saying no more doctors, for all of these weird reasons. and that's going to cause some problems. And if you strike the head, it's going to reverberate throughout the rest of the body. So, yeah, I think that's probably what's going to happen. They'll suspend licenses of the main ringleaders, the strike leaders, and then the higher administration that support these strikes, and so on and so forth. And that should give pause to the resident doctors. Will sit back and say, "Whoa! If they're suspending licenses for these doctors who called for the strike, and they're fining them $23,000, and they're going to put them in jail or prison or a combination thereof. What hope do we have as being low man on the totem pole?" Yeah, so I think that's what's going to happen here. I think they're going to strike the leadership of the Korean Medical Association. The Korean government has already gone through and done searches and gathered documents of the strike leaders, and it's really bad because when your reach goes so far, even into the medical school, that 46% of medical school students go on strike, and they're not even doctors. So how do they have that much power and influence? And why are these medical school students, how come they can't think for themselves? If you think, oh, I'm going to quit medical school, and then it ends up that at the stroke of a pen, the government says, well, nope, you're kicked out of school and you're out. You'll never get a license because you participated in this strike. Do you think the Korean Medical Association is going to have the back of these medical school students who got kicked out and can't become doctors? Yeah, that's ballsy. So yeah, it's in this game of, they're not going to call our bluff. And then it goes, well, we're going to call your bluff and we're going to do this order. And well, no, we're not going to return to work. Some of them did. But now it's back in the government's court. And now they're going to say, well, we told you we're going to suspend licenses, give fines and all of this stuff. And I think it's going to come to the leaders of the strike because it's putting the Korean people in danger, and that's a rule that they have on the books. I mean, besides the fact that they've gone against their Hippocratic Oath and left their patients high and dry. Now, on the other side of the coin, if you're not getting paid much and residents only get paid $3,000 a month, you're working 120 hours a week, 36-hour shifts, 6 days a week you're working, missing meals, you probably need to get compensated for that. But again, where does that compensation come from? It doesn't come from the government. It comes from these 90% of the hospitals are for profit. So there needs to be some type of negotiation between the for-profit investors and owners and shareholders and all that and the government to come to a way that we can get more doctors, treat more people, so that the doctors are not overworked, because, when you work 120 hours, do you think there's a possibility you could make some mistakes working a 36-hour shift? Yeah, that's a medical liability right there, and a legal liability as well. So, we continue on. I don't think, like I said, I don't think the suspensions will be en masse. I think it'll be for the ringleaders first, and then it'll kind of go down from them to the other leaders, and then the other leaders, and with the hopes that the government, and this is just my opinion, that this will be enough of a show of force that the residents will say, yeah, if they're doing that to our leaders, the strike leaders, and suspending their licenses and sending them to prison or fines or not being able to practice medicine, yeah, we better go back to work. But yeah, I think they should be getting paid a little bit more, which is easy to say, because I'm not the shareholder in a private hospital. It's, what are the margins for profits and so on and so forth. But there needs to be this equity, that doctors give good quality service. They should be paid for that service. And again, I think just having that much overwork just shows that we've gone so far down the road of greed center ethics that we forgot that we're training and teaching and taking care of patients, training doctors and taking care of patients, ultimately, the Hippocratic Oath. So anyway, that's what we got going on. It's pretty interesting. It's still nothing crazy. They're doing demonstrations, as we saw in some of the pictures, the Koreans doing their demonstrating. Of course, that's as big as it is right there. It doesn't go too far back. So, they tried to fill the picture up as big as possible. I've seen a lot bigger demonstrations in Korea over a variety of other things over the years I've been here. But, yeah, kind of interesting. Oh, I got to sneeze. Watermelon. So, yeah, that's an interesting thing. If you say watermelon and put your finger up to your nose when you're feeling like you want to sneeze, you won't sneeze, usually. So that's what we got going on here. Retired in Korea. The government is calling the Doctors Bluff. They're going to suspend the striking doctors' licenses, but I don't think it's going to hit the residents yet. They'll strike at the leadership, and we'll see how it goes from there. So it's not a knee-jerk reaction. It seems like it's very planned out and calculated on behalf of the government. But then again, the doctors' union it seems like they're kind of banking on their bluff not being called, and they'll continue to strike. But either way, however long this goes, the only people that it's hurting is the Korean people themselves. And they definitely need more doctors with the aging population. So, what is this crazy or not? Or is this, in developed countries, I've been searching around and I've seen people go on strike in the medical field, but never to the extent of where it puts the public in danger. Maybe it has, I'm not, I don't know everything, but I haven't found anything on this magnitude in any other country in the world. So yeah, it's kind of interesting on what we end up seeing here. So yeah, that's what we got going on here in Korea, and it is the fifth of the month, and it's about 10 to 8, so got to get ready and hit the gym and do all that stuff. So leave your comments, suggestions, tips. What do you think about it? What is the pros and cons of a medical union? What is the pros and cons of the government's position? How do we negotiate? When the Korean Medical Association says, no, we're not going to negotiate on adding any more doctors. I mean, do you feel that's really a good... is that a good sword to lean against as your last dying wish? Is that, hell no, that's the last thing. We're not going to compromise on that at all. Especially when you look at all the other evidence and the aging population, all that. How would you fix a situation? If you were king for a day here in Korea, I mean, how would you fix this situation? We want treatment, but we don't want government, interfering with, personal or, business and so on and so forth. We don't want too much government oversight, but it seems like we've gone so far as that maybe we do need some government oversight. I don't know. Put it in the comments down below. But yeah, that's it for today. Anything exciting pops up, I will let you know, and like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next video. Peace. Yeah.